There is a difference between taking responsibility and living in constant apology. When someone falls into the habit of over-apologizing, they do not realize how much power they are giving away. Saying sorry for things that do not require an apology is not humility. It is insecurity dressed up as politeness. It is the unspoken belief that you are always the inconvenience, always the problem, always the one who has to shrink so others can feel comfortable. This habit is one of the clearest signs of the so-called nice guy mentality, and it is one that slowly destroys confidence from the inside out. Think about how often you use the word sorry. Not for genuine mistakes, but for everyday actions. You bump into someone slightly and immediately say sorry even though it was not your fault. You want to share an idea in a group, but start with, sorry. Can I just say something? You need clarity on a task, but begin with, sorry to bother you. Every time you do this, you are sending a subtle message. My presence is a disturbance. My needs are less important. My voice doesn't deserve to be here unless I first apologize for it. Over time, these tiny phrases become the script of your identity, and you start to believe that you must always shrink before you can step forward. Over-apologizing creates a dynamic where others begin to treat you as less powerful than you really are. People notice when you are always the one folding, always the one taking the blame, always the one rushing to make peace, even when peace is not your responsibility. It does not make them respect you. It makes them overlook you. Respect is not given to those who are always apologizing for existing. Respect is given to those who know when to take responsibility and when to stand firm without guilt. The psychology behind this habit is often rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being liked. The nice guy thinks that by apologizing constantly, he is making himself easier to accept. But the truth is, constant apology has the opposite effect. It drains charisma and replaces it with a needy kind of energy. People do not admire someone who looks like they're always begging for forgiveness. They admire someone who can take up space without constantly questioning whether they deserve to. Over-apologizing also affects relationships in damaging ways. When you are always saying sorry for things that are not your fault, you train others to believe that you are responsible for their feelings, their comfort, and their happiness. That is a heavy and unrealistic burden to carry. It creates an imbalance where you become the fixer, the pleaser, the one who takes all the responsibility while others take none. And what does that lead to? Resentment. Because deep down, you start to feel unappreciated, unseen, and exhausted from always bending to everyone else's expectations. Another hidden consequence is how over-apologizing kills authenticity. Instead of speaking freely, you filter every word through the lens of, will this upset someone? Or, do I need to apologize before I even say this? That constant filtering silences your real thoughts and prevents genuine connection. People cannot connect with you if they never truly see you. They only see the watered-down version of yourself that is desperate to keep the peace. And ironically, that desperation to be accepted often pushes people away. Nobody wants to connect with a mask. They want to connect with a real person who has the courage to own their presence without guilt. Breaking the habit of over-apologizing is not about becoming arrogant or dismissive. It is about learning the difference between genuine accountability and unnecessary self-blame. Accountability means saying sorry when you have caused harm, when you have broken trust, when you have acted unfairly. That is strength. But apologizing for existing, for speaking up, for having needs, that is weakness disguised as kindness. And the sooner you recognize that difference, the sooner you begin to reclaim your confidence. Start by paying attention to your words. Notice when sorry slips out unnecessarily. Replace it with gratitude instead. Instead of sorry I'm late, say thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry to bother you, say I appreciate your time. These small shifts transform your presence from one of guilt to one of strength and respect. People respond differently when they feel your confidence rather than your insecurity. They hear authority in your tone, not apology. They see a person who knows their value, not someone who is begging for permission to exist. At its core, over-apologizing is about self-worth. The less you value yourself, the more you feel the need to apologize for every move. The more you own your worth, the more selective you become with your apologies. You begin to understand that your presence is not a disturbance. Your voice is not an interruption. Your needs are not inconveniences. You belong in every room you step into, and you do not need to shrink or seek forgiveness for that truth. One of the most draining habits that keeps people trapped in the nice guy mindset is the constant need to seek approval. It looks harmless on the surface, almost like being considerate, but underneath it is a deep craving for validation that strips away self, respect, and independence. Seeking approval becomes a silent addiction. Every choice, every action, every word is filtered through the question, will they like this? Will they accept me if I do this? Will this keep me in their good graces? Living like this is not living freely. It is living as a prisoner to the opinions of others. Approval seeking shows up in subtle ways. It could be the hesitation before you give your opinion, waiting to see if everyone else agrees first. It could be the way you change your preferences depending on who you are around, nodding along to music you don't like, agreeing with views you don't share, or pretending to enjoy activities that bore you. It could even be the way you phrase your sentences, softening your words to avoid disagreement, or asking questions like, "Is that okay?" even when you're entitled to make your own decisions. These habits slowly erode your identity because you are not living as yourself. You are living as a reflection of what others want you to be. The danger of always seeking approval is that it never ends. No matter how much you bend, no matter how much you adapt, no matter how much you change yourself to please others, there will always be someone who doesn't approve. You could spend your entire life chasing acceptance and still end up feeling rejected, because the truth is that approval is conditional, but authenticity is not. The more you live for their validation, the less you feel validated within yourself. And when that inner void grows, you become even more desperate for external approval, creating a cycle that never stops. What makes this habit so destructive is how it impacts respect. People rarely admire someone who constantly bends over backward to be liked. At first, they may enjoy the convenience of having someone who always agrees, always accommodates, and never pushes back. But over time, that lack of backbone becomes unattractive. Respect is born from authenticity, not compliance. When people sense that you are always shaping yourself to win their approval, and they stop seeing you as an equal and start seeing you as someone they can control, that dynamic destroys respect. And without respect, no relationship, personal or professional, can thrive. Approval seeking also steals opportunities. How many times have you stopped yourself from taking action because you worried about what others would think? How many risks have you avoided because you were afraid someone might disapprove? Every missed chance adds up, and slowly, you begin to realize that your life is being dictated not by your dreams, but by your fear of rejection. The most successful, fulfilled people in the world are not the ones who were liked by everyone. They are the ones who moved forward regardless of who approved or disapproved. They understood that approval is temporary, but authenticity builds a legacy. There is also a heavy emotional toll that comes with this habit. Seeking approval puts you in a constant state of anxiety, always second-guessing yourself, always replaying conversations in your head, always wondering if you said the right thing. That mental burden is exhausting, and it keeps you from experiencing peace. True confidence is quiet. It does not ask for permission to exist. But approval seeking keeps you loud in the wrong way. Loud with insecurity, loud with doubt, loud with the desperate hope that someone will tell you that you're enough. The irony is that the more you seek approval, the less you get it. People are drawn to certainty, to strength, to authenticity. They want to be around someone who knows who they are and doesn't apologize for it. When you constantly ask for validation, you communicate that you don't trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, why should anyone else? Confidence is magnetic, but approval seeking repels because it drains the energy from every interaction. Breaking this habit requires a shift in perspective. You have to understand that disapproval is not a threat. Someone not liking you does not mean you are unworthy. Someone disagreeing with you does not mean you are wrong. You cannot control how others perceive you, but you can control how you perceive yourself. The moment you stop chasing approval and start living in alignment with your own values, you begin to attract the kind of respect that cannot be forced. You begin to see that being true to yourself is far more powerful than being accepted by everyone else. The truth is, approval is fleeting. People's opinions change with the wind. One moment they praise you, the next moment they criticize you. If your worth is tied to that shifting tide, you will never feel stable. But when your worth is anchored in authenticity, in your own values, in your own choices, you become unshakable. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I like who I am becoming? That shift is the end of approval seeking and the beginning of true confidence. One of the clearest habits that keeps people stuck in the nice guy cycle is the inability to set and enforce boundaries. Boundaries are not about being harsh, cold, or distant. They are about self-respect. They are about drawing a line between what is acceptable and what is not. But when you fall into the pattern of avoiding boundaries, you begin to train people to see you as someone who can be pushed, manipulated, or taken advantage of. And over time, that lack of structure in your relationships doesn't make people love you more. It makes them respect you less. Avoiding boundaries often comes from the fear of disappointing others. You say yes when you want to say no. You agree to things that drain you because you don't want to appear difficult. You allow behavior that bothers you because you're afraid of conflict. At first, it feels easier to let things slide, to keep the peace, to convince yourself that it's not worth making an issue out of. But peace bought at the expense of your self-respect is not peace. It is surrender. And every time you surrender, you lose a little piece of your confidence. The problem with avoiding boundaries is that people notice. Human beings naturally test limits. If someone sees that you let them cancel plans on you without consequence, they will do it again. If someone sees that you allow disrespectful behavior without speaking up, they will push further. Without boundaries, people begin to treat you as though your time, your energy, and your feelings are negotiable. And the truth is, people only value what they cannot easily exploit. When you do not protect your space, others will not protect it for you. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are gates meant to teach people how to come in. When you avoid boundaries, you allow others to enter your life with muddy shoes, leaving behind damage that you end up cleaning alone. Over time, this creates resentment. You may not express it directly, but inside, you feel the weight of being overlooked, of always bending, of always putting yourself last. That resentment eats away at your self-worth, because deep down, you know you should have spoken up. You know you should have stood your ground. The avoidance of boundaries also shows up in subtle habits. You stay in conversations that drain you because you don't want to seem rude. You give your time to people who never reciprocate because you don't want to look selfish. You accept jokes at your expense, thinking it's easier to laugh along than to assert yourself. Every one of these small moments communicates something about you, that your comfort comes second, that your voice carries less weight, and that others are free to set the rules in your life. This is not kindness. It is self-erasure. Many people avoid boundaries because they equate them with rejection. They think saying no means losing people. But the truth is, saying yes to everything is what actually drives people away. Without boundaries, relationships lose balance. One person gives endlessly, while the other takes endlessly. And over time, the giver burns out. Healthy relationships require boundaries because boundaries create clarity. They tell people where respect begins and where disrespect is not allowed to cross. Another consequence of avoiding boundaries is how it shapes your identity. Without clear lines, you begin to define yourself by what others want from you rather than who you really are. You become the person who is always available, always agreeable, always accommodating. And while that might win temporary approval, it never builds long-term respect. Respect comes when people know you stand for something, when they know there are certain things you will not tolerate. Without that clarity, you remain in the background of your own life, letting others write the script for you. Boundaries also determine the kind of opportunities you attract. When you avoid boundaries, you attract people who are looking for someone to use. Opportunists thrive on those who cannot say no. But when you set boundaries, you filter out the users and attract people who value balance. People who respect themselves are drawn to others who do the same. And that respect creates relationships, both personal and professional, that are healthier, stronger, and more fulfilling. Breaking the habit of avoiding boundaries requires courage. It requires you to embrace the discomfort of conflict, to accept that not everyone will like your no, and to understand that disappointing others is sometimes the price of protecting yourself. But that price is worth paying because the alternative is far worse. The alternative is living a life where your needs are invisible, where your presence is undervalued, and where your voice is silenced. Boundaries are not selfish, they are essential. They are the foundation of self-respect, and without them, confidence cannot exist. One of the most damaging habits that keeps people locked in the role of the so-called nice guy is the tendency to suppress authenticity. This is when you hold back your true thoughts, your real feelings, and your genuine personality because you believe showing them will make you less likable. It's when you hide behind a mask of constant agreeableness, nodding along even when you disagree, smiling when you want to frown, and pretending to be okay when you are not. On the surface, it might feel like this keeps the peace and keeps people around you happy. But underneath, it slowly chips away at your self-respect and robs you of the opportunity to build real, meaningful connections. Suppressing authenticity often begins with a fear of rejection. You tell yourself that if people really knew what you thought, if they saw who you really are, they would walk away. So instead, you give them a watered-down version of yourself. You become overly cautious with your words, overly calculated with your actions, and overly careful not to step on any toes. The problem is, When you are not showing your true self, the relationships you form are not real either. They are based on a character you created, not the person you are. And because of that, those relationships always feel a little shallow, a little unfulfilling, a little empty. The cost of hiding authenticity is heavy. Every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, you reinforce the belief that your voice doesn't matter. Every time you pretend to agree when you don't, you tell yourself that your perspective is less valuable than someone else's. And every time you minimize your own needs for the sake of others, you send the message to yourself that you are not worthy of having those needs met. Over time, this leads to frustration, resentment, and an inner emptiness that no amount of external approval can fix. The irony is that people crave authenticity more than perfection. When you suppress who you are to appear perfect, polished, and agreeable, you become forgettable. People might like you, but they don't remember you. They don't feel deeply connected to you because there's nothing real for them to connect to. Authenticity, with all its flaws, quirks, and imperfections, is what makes people feel drawn to you. It's what creates trust, because others can sense when you're being genuine. Suppressing that, no matter how well-intentioned, robs you of the very thing that makes relationships meaningful. Suppressing authenticity also weakens your confidence. Confidence is not about pretending to have it all together. Confidence comes from being comfortable in your own skin, from knowing you can speak your truth without apology. But when you suppress that truth, you place your sense of worth in the hands of others. You wait for validation instead of creating it within yourself. You adjust and bend, hoping others will accept you, instead of standing firm and letting your authenticity draw the right people to you. That constant shifting doesn't just exhaust you, it erodes the core of your identity. Think about the moments in your life when you felt the most alive, the most free. Chances are those were the times you were unapologetically yourself. Maybe you laughed too loudly. Maybe you shared an unpopular opinion. Maybe you showed vulnerability and admitted fear. And instead of rejection, you probably found connection. Because authenticity attracts authenticity. When you show up as you give others permission to do the same. But when you hide behind the mask of the nice guy, you create a barrier. Others can sense the hesitation, the lack of truth, and they respond with distance. Suppressing authenticity doesn't just affect your relationships with others. It affects your relationship with yourself. Deep down, you know when you are not being honest. You feel the weight of pretending, of holding back, of biting your tongue. And each time it becomes harder to trust yourself. You begin to question whether people would still like you if they saw the real you. That self-doubt grows louder the more you suppress your truth. Eventually, you may even lose touch with who you are because you've spent so long playing roles for the approval of others. The habit of suppressing authenticity also keeps you small. It stops you from taking risks, from pursuing passions, from living boldly. You fear judgment, so you hide your creativity. You fear disapproval, so you silence your opinions. You fear abandonment, so you settle for shallow connections. And yet, the life you truly want, the one filled with passion, respect, and deep love, can only be built on authenticity. Without it, you are stuck living in the shadow of what could be, never fully stepping into who you are meant to become. Breaking free from this habit means embracing the discomfort of being real. It means allowing yourself to be seen in your rawness, your imperfection, and your truth. It means saying no when you want to say no, speaking up when something matters to you, and daring to show up as yourself even if it risks rejection. Because the truth is, rejection will come. Not everyone will like the real you. But that's okay, because the ones who do will love you deeply, fully, and genuinely. And that kind of connection is worth more than all the shallow approval in the world.